Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Business Spotlight. I am Scott McMeans with Action Coach. Today I'm with Barbara Anthony from PlayGap. And what we're going to talk about today is what's made her very successful in the world that she lives in. So I'm going to ask you, Barbara, tell me your story. The microphone and camera are yours. Introduce yourself to the audience. Let them know who you are. Let them know what you do. And we're going to start talking about how well you do it. So introduce yourself, please.
Thanks, Scott. My name is Barb Anthony, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of PlayGap. I'm also a licensed clinical social worker, and I am also a parent of three amazing kids, and an athlete as well as a previous coach as well. So I'm doing all the things like a lot of you out there are doing.
Love it. When you say athlete, what does that mean to you? What sports did you play? How do you define athlete in your world?
Oh, wow. Well, anybody can be an athlete or is an athlete. I like to encourage
Mhm.
people who like to say they used to be an athlete to embrace that as a current and say I am an athlete. And because we don't just stop being an athlete when we graduate from high school or college or when we become parents. So for me, an athlete is anyone who moves their bodies in an intentional way and has a good time doing it. And that could be a variety of different sports or activities, recreation, competitive, elite or non-elite, at any level. And so sport is a lifelong experience, at least in my mind. So I've played a lot of sports, too many to count. I grew up in an athletic family, full of cousins. Every single cousin played a sport, all different
Yeah.
sports. I grew up with parents who were multi-sport athletes, coaches. My grandfather was a coach. I spent a lot of time in his open gyms as a kid, watching the community come in and play basketball. And I watch my own parents participate in sports even in adulthood as well. So for me, a lot of what we do in PlayGap is very real. It's very possible, though it comes with a lot of barriers. So currently, I'm on a rowing team, an all women's rowing team, and it is a special part of my week. I hold that time really sacred, and it took a long time to tee up to the ability to get there, to get back to sports. Right, basketball is my favorite sport, though I don't play full court right now. Who knows? Never know. Maybe down the line we'll figure out another way to get back involved with basketball. But sports and moving my body, being part of a team is super important to me and really crucial to my well being.
I like the idea of what you said. And if I remember this right, an athlete is anybody who moves their body in intention or moves their body in an intentional way and has fun doing it.
Yeah,
The second caveat is what makes it special, right?
yeah,
Because I can say I'm a great basketball player. I'm not. But if I have fun doing it, then I'm an athlete playing basketball, right?
sure,
I would
absolutely.
love to say I'm an amazing golfer. I'm not, but I'm an athlete because I play golf and I enjoy every moment of it. So
Yeah,
the second part of that statement, I think, is what holds true. So thank you for saying that part of it, because I think most people would probably define it differently. So this is a great
yeah.
definition to start out from.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I think a lot of people look at their like encounter a lot of folks through PlayGap that say, I'm not an athlete. I didn't go pro. I didn't play Division One. I. I
Yeah.
didn't I didn't play in college at all. So that means my story doesn't matter. And I absolutely disagree. I think that there are, incredible people in the corporate world, out in the world of work, in any place that have a sports story. And we all do. We all have a sports story, whether it's
Yeah.
I played, I watched, I coached, I was a kid of a coach. Like it's an institution just like healthcare and education in our society anyway. We everybody bumps up against sport at some point.
Yeah. From a continuation of your athletic experience, why is it that so many people stop doing or stop being an athlete? What's the reason why?
I think there's a lot of reasons. And as a social worker, and just as this is kind of how I've always viewed the world, I look at it almost on a multi system level. So, like, I think there are individual barriers that we all encounter, and they're all different for every person. Though, for women in particular, for those as the primary caretakers of their home, right? Like, transitions through life are just different. And so, if you're also talking about opportunity, that's a little bit more at a meso or like a community level, right? So, reasons for stopping might not because it's a choice. It might just because there's a lack of access, a lack of programs, right? So we have our personal encounters with barriers that either force us
Okay.
to choose or limit our ability to participate. Then we have our community access, right? And then we have some more like larger macro, like policy levels or like societal norms. So if you've ever had a conversation with somebody at the water cooler, or in the workplace, and especially if it's a woman that says, oh, I used to play whatever, or I go and I row now, or I play a sport now, often it's not like super celebrated. It's not something people want to talk about. It's not really supported or encouraged because it feels like, well, you're not, like, why does that matter? It's extra, it's other, right? It becomes other, or like,
Yeah.
well, if life gets hard, you should just cancel your sport. And so if you think about sport, we're talking about fun, but from my perspective and our perspective at PlayGap, it is supposed to be fun, but the sense of belonging and the physical movement, that is all about physical, social, and emotional health. And so if we have healthy people, we have working people, and then we have people who are taking care of their families and communities. So it all comes back to how healthy we are at the end of the day. And adults
Yeah.
don't get a lot of support for this type of experience.
Well, I
And
think once we get out of childhood and into adulthood, they think, well, we're adults. We think we have the capacity to think well for ourselves,
yeah, it's
and
on
we get
it's
to
on you, right?
right. And there's so many different distractions. And this, what I like, you broke it down. There's a personal barrier, the
Mhm.
barriers of community access, and then the societal norm barriers where mentally, whether it's correct or not, you disconnect from something you were passionate about when you were an 18-year-old. And now that you're sitting in a cubicle, all of a sudden you don't want to do it anymore. So how do we regenerate that mindset? And that's, I'm assuming that's where Play Gap comes into play.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what we have built through this very unique organization is based on not just our own experiences, but experiences we've heard from the community, and for through our growth, through this shared experience, the details of the barriers can be different, the details of the challenges are different, but there is this identity piece that we tend to lose, right? I almost think about it as like dawning and shedding this identity, and like, so there's this
Mm,
expectation, there's this societal expectation of like, okay, what are you going to do next? That's always the question, right? If you're talking to a recent graduate, high school, college, what are you doing next? It's not like,
mm,
how can we help this currently very high functioning, highly competitive, amazing human go do that in the world? It's like, okay, that has to be left behind because now you're a grown
yeah.
up, right? There's this
Yeah.
expectation of like, now you're an adult, you can't go do that. Like, we're not
Yeah.
allowed to play anymore or have any fun or take care of ourselves in the same way, right? And then there's the support for that. So it really is a very interconnected, and yet a lot of it tends to be our problem, right? We're the ones pulling up those youth athletes and supporting their youth experience. And then for what? We talk about successful women CEOs played sports. Okay, that's great. Do you know other women who are successful, not CEOs, played sports and still do play sports, right?
Yeah.
And then we also prop up our professional athletes. So this age group, this demographic of the majority of people who don't go pro support elite sports as well. And so who supports us supporting all these people? Not No
Yeah.
one.
No,
And
it's
Play Gap is the only organization of its kind doing the work we're doing specifically for this
so
demographic.
let's dive into what makes Play Gap what it is. So walk me through, tell the audience, what is it that you do, the services you provide, and the people you serve. Walk me through the mission.
Yeah. So Play Gap is we've been around informally since about 2018, and I'm gonna give a lot of credit to my co-founder Elise View, who was an athlete on a tackle women's football team here in Cleveland and was injured and wanted to stay involved. And through that desire to stay involved with her teammates in this community, ended up having conversations with a lot of other local athletes and different teams, different sports, and they encountered the same barriers. Right now, recruitment was a challenge because no one knew about them. So how do we market recreational and competitive organized teams, at this level? Funding, of course, was a challenge, but that wasn't one of the top three, right? It was more about marketing, recruitment, visibility, right? And how do we structure our teams and organizations so that we can thrive and be sustainable? So those came up very early on, and Elise was part of those that core group. I was I came on because I found this group. They did a calendar fundraiser just for fun, just to raise a few bucks for each team. And I found this down the wormhole of the internet one day, and I reached out and said, "What is this?" And this could be something. Like, this isn't just like a here in Northeast Ohio problem. Like, I feel like this is a grander gap in the community of needs, especially within this population and just with people them as adults themselves. I'm a social worker. I love building programs. I have this insight into like systemic structure and support and assessment and all kinds of skills I bring. Can I help? I just said, can I help? And Elise was like, oh my gosh, absolutely. And so this was in the parking lot of her work one day. It was a windy, like January, December day. And that was the beginning of all of it. It was just an offer to see something grow. And through that, we've done multiple presentations. We've tried to think through our mission. And so our current mission is to champion equity and accessibility in sports for adult women. And so
Okay.
with that, our values are listed on our website, and we wrote those at our first conference in Denver, Colorado in 2019. And they haven't changed our values about kind of how we do our work. And I would encourage folks to visit our website and look at our FAQs down in the fine print and see there's a ton more. But and so our biggest kind of our bread and butter of what we started from was this access, this piece of like accessing accurate, up-to-date, helpful information if you are looking to get involved. That was like the biggest barrier that I know I experienced. I know a lot of other people experience is like what's out there and how can I even get involved? And then once you click that first click, is that information there and ready for you, right? Or do you have to continue to dig, right? So
Yeah.
as a parent, as a busy professional, I don't have time. I'm not going to click 9 times on your website. I'm just not doing it, right? So our index that you see is our listed sports, and we're partnered right now with about 25 teams and about 30 plus programs within those teams. Every single one of those teams has been assessed, vetted, and partnered with us that in terms of our alignment with our shared values, opportunities for access, and transparency of who we serve and how they serve those teams as well. So, and they span mostly in Northeast Ohio, yet we are growing. PlayGap is not a local brand. We're open to extension outside of Ohio, albeit we will need abundant financial resources to staff the potential growth that we anticipate.
Yeah.
We're continuing to work on that, but right now we're doing the work, so we have to focus on serving those teams. So the index helps people find something to do, and then we help those teams problem solve all of their challenges. Most of those teams are that we have listed, I would say 90% of them are also volunteer run and have budgets under about $5,000, right? And yet they don't say that their biggest challenge is finances. The biggest challenge is recruitment, marketing, structure, volunteers, right? And so
Okay.
they just want to keep playing, and they'll do it with very minimum budget if they have to, and they can, right? If they're trying to keep costs low for their participants, which is a challenge in adulthood. They're trying to keep volunteers running the program, which is a huge challenge if you have any idea how to coordinate volunteers and manage people, right?
It's like herding cats, right?
And we help, right? We help these teams and organizations in any of those ways. So if you have a question about transitions of volunteers, we can help you form a plan of what that looks like for your team, right? We help bring everybody under one roof. So the idea is that if you search Ohio women's sports, at least previously, you find us, which means you find 25 teams instead of saying, oh, I wonder if there's a women's water polo team in Cleveland. You wouldn't necessarily know that until you find this sport organization or this organization that's for adult women in sports, and then you see, oh wow, there's 25 different sports I could play, right?
That's impressive. And I like the idea that the index is basically a way or a place to go find your place to go have fun as an athlete.
Yeah.
Right. If I go into the index, that's a resource for me to locate what's available for me.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Robert, where do you get your funding from?
Currently, we are mostly funded through small grants, small foundation grants, and donations as well.
Okay.
So we are looking to expand into, once you get that really big one-time grant, right, it opens a lot more doors, and so we're working on that as well. But I think without a good product, without a solid program or programs, right, you can't get funding unless you have something that's
Sure.
true. And so we're getting there.
Well, what's interesting, and if I'm understanding you correctly, you are building an unbelievably strong network of women that are, and you even said it, you have professional athletes that have come into the program. You have CEOs, you have people that are not CEOs, but they still like to play. You have this unbelievable network of committed women that want to be a part of this. And now through that effort, maybe you can find not donations because they, but that's a network that can go out and find grant money. They can go out and find um, different ways to fundraise and build even more for you. So that's an interesting perspective you could take, right?
Mhm. For sure.
So when you're building this and all the different barriers, because you've made comment of the word barrier 4 times so far, I think. So I want to know, what are some of the barriers that PlayGap has experienced that you've kind of overcome? Because I want the audience to learn there's problems out there, but there's solutions too. So walk us through some of the barriers that you think have been the most significant, and some of the ones that you've been able to get over and get ready and prepared for PlayGap to be where it is now.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. I mean, I think part of our mindset is that like we acknowledge and anticipate that there's going to be barriers along the way. I think you have to when you're starting something from scratch, right? So one is just we built this from an idea, right? A shared experience. And so we started out just a group of people doing the work, and I think that's just one of the things. It's that you don't see the path, right? Forward, and I like to think that's because you're on it, right? And so you just have to go and you just have to start. And so sometimes you just start and then encounter the barriers and then figure out what to do along the way.
Yeah.
And having people who are invested and part of this idea and just walking alongside you with on the path is part of what helps the problems feel a little smaller. So in terms of barriers, it's time. We're doing this in our spare time, right? And so I say spare
Yeah.
time, and yet we spend hundreds of hours a year. I mean, we have thousands of hours logged of volunteer time since we started. And so, like I say, spare time, and yet the mental time we take up thinking about
Yeah.
how to plan and what to do and how to problem solve is beyond just the tangible hands-on event time or meeting time, right? And so it was first, how do we decide? Do we want to be a for-profit organization or do we want to be a nonprofit organization? That was like question, I don't know, not question one.
Question number one.
It was like, I was
So
actually like question like 10, because it was more important to us to develop like where are we starting from and what are our values, right? Like we established a
good.
nice slow ground network. Like you have to have the dirt before you have the roots. And so like we really spent a lot of time getting a solid footing of like who are we and what do we believe and how are we going to do this? Then the question was, okay, let's talk about, business structure, right? And development. And so we agreed that nonprofit felt more aligned with what our future work would entail and serving a need in the community. It doesn't mean you can't make money, right? Just because you're a nonprofit, a 501c3, 501c3s make tons of money if, sometimes, and some of them don't make any, and they're all doing amazing work. So that was one of the first decisions going forward. And so, yeah, time is probably a huge barrier. The other, I would say, I don't want to call it a barrier. I want to call it just an experience, because I think this would resonate with a lot of women out there. But there's a regular convincing that needs to be done that adults, especially adult women, deserve to get this kind of support, right? It's been an interesting fundraising challenge, and also challenge in terms of talking to people in the community about when you're talking about a group of people that are typically the ones solving the problems for your families and your community. When we are coming out asking for help and support and funding in order to do these activities, convincing people that it's necessary is one of the biggest challenges that we do on a regular basis from day one till now.
Yeah.
It's going to be something that we've committed to doing for as long as it takes.
Well, one thing that I've picked up so far in our conversation is the fact that you went 501(c)(3), you wanted the work to be more important than the money you were making. At least I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's the interpretation of what you've said so far. So the work is more important than the structure of the organization. And now you're talking about a regular convincing of people, women in particular, that haven't had support before, and you're working through the effort to convince them it's okay to ask, or it's okay to be a part of something because the support is necessary, but it's also necessary because it's something you want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's an interest in being an athlete and having fun, but if you don't know about it and you don't have the access or the support to continue on that path to be that athlete, you kind of lose sight of it.
Mm-hmm.
So your mission, and I'm just putting this all together based on the conversation so far, it's been great to learn PlayGap is an organization that's built for people that want to keep having fun doing something they've enjoyed their entire life.
Mhm.
And you're the vehicle that opens the door to have them gain access to 25 different sports they can play, different leagues, different teams they can be a part of. Your mission isn't necessarily the highbrow words that you use, and they're great. Your mission was fantastic, but your mission is simply, let's keep having fun because people love to move their body in an intentional way and have fun while they're doing it.
Mhm. And we need to be healthy individuals for
Well,
the
and here's an interesting play on this, and I've been thinking about this. All the different connections that you have within your network, there's a way to convince people that if you're an athlete, meaning you move your body with intention, have fun doing it, you're going to be a healthier person.
Mhm.
Healthier people make better employees because they're not out sick.
Yeah.
They don't cost a lot of money in an insurance world.
Yep.
And the motivation to be athletic or at least physically fit allows you to have a better mental attitude so you can work in a better environment. So there's
Mhm.
all kind of cascades around the idea of Play Gap is a vehicle that gets people in a better state of mind and a better body because you've always enjoyed doing it. Why would you
Yeah.
stop? So let's keep going.
Right. Well, and why is there all of a sudden a switch that turns off that we all know about that for youth sports, right? All of those things you said, right? It's like, oh, here's why it's so important for kids. And
Right.
here's why it's so important for elite athletes to have integrated care for their physical and mental needs, right? So
100%.
so it's really simple. It's even simpler. It's like, why do we forget that that applies to the 98% of people who aren't pro? Why does that all of a sudden not apply, right? So it's even simpler to me. It's like there is the gap. Like there's this jump that happens over the general, 25 to age
Yeah.
60 population where all of a sudden it's not the same priority and it needs
Yeah.
to be.
One of the great commercials that I think the NCAA has is I forget the number, but it's a number of our athletes that currently play in NCAA will become professionals, but
Yeah.
just not athletes. And it's almost as if that door gets closed on their life, and that's nowhere near. If you're a professional or you're a collegiate athlete and you're not good enough to go pro, you still really enjoy playing that sport and you want to keep doing it. So why not? Whether it's find a different sport that you can really sink your teeth into
Mhm.
or continue playing the sport you've always loved. I don't know if your history was rowing in college, but you found rowing somehow. When did you find rowing?
Yeah. So, well, interestingly enough, I had an injury very late in my high school career, and that put me out of playoffs and kind of removed me from any like collegiate conversations just because of I wasn't anticipating going any higher than like D3 for myself, but never ended up playing basketball in college on a team, and so I went into college without an athletic identity. Right? No one knew I was an athlete. No one knew I had this experience. I just showed up and I was just a general student population attendee, and I had a real problem with that. No one else did, right? No one knew. I really felt like this sense of loss and grief and like just a missing piece for myself. So I found rowing because my older sister was rowing at the college at the time, and I thought, well, hey, I can do that with a recovering knee and maybe see, because it's a different kind of sport. And that's how I found it. I rowed for about a year and a half, and then I joined the inaugural water polo team at my college because I was a really good swimmer. They were trying to start a whole new NCAA program, and
Damn.
I did that and I loved it. It's one of my favorite sports to play. And
Okay.
uh, and so 20 some years later, as I'm getting back into my own sport, rowing was the most attainable, but it still took me about 18 months. And I know what I'm doing, right? I know what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
It still was a tough time. COVID was a huge challenge for all of us in every way. And so, yeah, it took me a long time to get back to it. And that's what I'm doing now. So,
I think it's amazing. And I wrote down the word trailblazer. Not too many people would want to be a part of an inaugural sport in college. Not too many people would want to be a co-founder of an organization that helps other people do something that they enjoy doing themselves without being selfish about it. And our interaction so far has led me to believe that you are one of the selfless people I've ever met, that
no.
you're willing to give of your time and talent to do this so other people can be connected through Play Gap for their
Yeah.
fun and their athleticism and bring them together.
Their
This is,
belonging, right?
pardon me.
Their sense of belonging. That really is, it's such a, that's it. You connected both of those things in such a nice way that really showed that like when you have both of those things and you find a group of people that are doing that, you feel like you're home a little. You feel like
Yeah.
this is a sense of me that deserves and needs this, and I feel so much better for it. And absolutely,
You
I
know what? You you
that's
you
all I want
brought
to say.
something up. Okay. Um, Most athletes, when they leave the sport they play,
Mhm.
when asked what, and let's just say 4 years later, they're asked, what do you miss most about it?
Yeah.
The locker room, the
Yep.
bus rides,
The
the
dinners.
camaraderie with my friends that
Yeah.
they're my friends for life, but I don't remember that double play we made all necessarily, but you did. Thank you. But
Right.
I'm talking about the bus ride. I'm talking
Yeah.
about the fun we had as a team, and this. You said it. There's a loss, a sense of grief, and a sense of belonging that I was missing, and now with rowing, all that comes back.
Oh, I
So,
yeah.
okay, through the course of this conversation, we have changed play gap multiple times, but it remains the same,
It's
right?
all of it. It's all of it.
Right. It remains the same. This is the vehicle that you can get connected to a group of people that have the same mentality that you do.
Yeah.
Let's move our bodies with intention and have fun doing it. And
Yeah.
let's have a sense of belonging. I think it's wonderful.
Thank you.
And there's been a number of barriers. You talk about, marketing, funding, recruitment, access to it. And these are the barriers that most people have to get into the world of athletics when they're no longer in school or any kind of organized program. And now PlayGap is doing this for them.
Hmm.
Go to playgap.com and figure out how to do this
Yeah.
for yourself, because there's access that you have because of them and the work they do.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. And help us find more people, help us become part of the organization. Just if you're supporting, you don't even have to play or coach, right? Some people have had unfortunately negative experiences and they transition out of sport with they need some healing. They need to do some healing. And sometimes it's
Yeah.
just about spectating and finding a group of people that will support that. Right. So this isn't always about like that, hey, we've all had this fantastic sports experience. Let's keep it going. Sometimes a lot of who we want to help welcome is those new people to sport, right? Maybe you had a bad experience. Maybe you need
Yeah.
to find some help and healing in a good, positive environment. Maybe you've never played sports before and you don't identify as an athlete in any way, right? Can you find a sport that welcomes a novice? Absolutely. Like we've got it all. So
Yeah. That's awesome.
we're for
I
all of
like
you.
that. This is so sad because
Good to go.
we have a minute left in our
Oh, good.
conversation. So all the information to connect to you and PlayGap will be in the description down below.
Great.
I want to thank you for being on the show. This is awesome.
Thanks,
And
Scott.
I
I
look forward to
appreciate it.
writing this one up. Yeah, get this out into the marketplace. So thank you so much. And again, we'll connect on the next episode of the Business Spotlight.